I have a question for you about the Beatles. How long were they together for? Two significant dates are definite contenders for bookends to the remarkable career of these four young men. This is the first time the Beatles were recorded, not at EMI Studios, but live at the Cavern August 22, 1962, and it's just days after Ringo officially joined the band. Fast forward exactly 7 years to August 22, 1969. The Beatles have just finished their swan song, Abbey Road, all four attending a mixing session 2 days prior, and they appeared together for the last time as Beatles in this photo session. This is it. This is their last creative act, their last presentation, their last bow. Individually, some Beatles will drop into the studio to perform overdubs on the dark side of their swan song, Let It Be, and three meet to reprise George's I Me Mine. They will also make their respective Christmas record contributions for the Beatles fan club. But the Beatles as a collective unit are over after 7 years.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
The length of a biblical cycle, or the time it takes for every cell in the human body to renew. Is there something special about the number 7? Of course, you could say the Beatles' Imperial Phase didn't begin until the release of their first #1 record, From Me to You, in April 1963. But going that route, you'd have to say it doesn't end until the release of Let It Be in April 1970.
Let it be.
For avoidance of doubt, that's 7 years.
All good children go to heaven.
Also, look at Pink Floyd. Their Imperial Phase begins when they tour the Dark Side of the Moon before they record the album, which is a weird way of doing things, but anyway, that's 1972, and they are done by 1979.
Leaving just a memory.
After which we get a de facto Waters solo album few people talk about, and then Waters leaves and Pink Floyd becomes something else. That run of albums from Dark Side to the Wall is most certainly their Imperial Phase. Again, 7 years. Another band big for many years were Genesis. But the Genesis I'm most interested in, the Peter Gabriel Genesis, recorded their first album in August 1968 and then toured their best album, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, in 1975. Peter Gabriel put out a statement he was leaving the band in August, 7 years after they recorded their first album. The Imperial Phase of the supergroup ABBA begins with them winning the Eurovision Song Contest with the song Waterloo in 1974 and ends with the release of their last album, The Visitors, in 1981. That's 7 years. Sometime in the latter half of 1983, Depeche Mode commenced their first world tour. Their Imperial Phase begins, and then in the first half of 1990, they are on top of the world with their World Violation Tour. Touring the best album they will ever make after each album they've made has gotten better and better. When the Violation Tour is done, the 7 years Imperial Phase is over and the magic is gone. They begin their long artistic and commercial decline. Sorry, Songs of Faith and Devotion fans, but the stats don't lie. And neither did Alan Wilder, who was unhappy on Songs of Faith and left afterwards. The Pet Shop Boys had a false start when their first release of their single West End Girls flopped.
You think you're mad, too unstable.
Their Imperial Phase begins with the release of their stunning debut album, Please, in 1986, and ends with their album, Very, and its Brit Award-nominated single Go West in 1993. After that, the fans continued buying their music, but they ceased to win many new listeners. And there is a marked drop in quality, as well as record sales between Very and Bilingual. Boards of Canada are the undisputed masters of ambient music. Their Imperial Phase begins with the release of their debut album, Music Has a Right to Children, in 1998, and ends with the release of the Campfire Head Phase in 2005. Again, 7 years. Their only other album, Tomorrow's Harvest, from 2013, is an album clearly outside their Imperial Phase. Remember, before the Imperial Phase, the fans love you because you're theirs. During it, everyone loves you. You're the zeitgeist. Afterwards, the faithful remain, but the wider world moves on. It's the casual fan that defines the Imperial Phase, not the diehards. The diehards like Tomorrow's Harvest. But to the casual fan, it sounds like what it is. Generic ambient music 100 other ambient groups could come up with. Not the musically entrancing and Doppler-shifted collage of memories warped and baked in the sun that feature on the Imperial albums. Nobody can imitate those. Of course, die-hard fans of all these bands are going to be upset by the suggestion that music they like falls outside the Imperial Phase, but it's just a fact that bands that stay together for too long start to produce inferior music. The Rolling Stones from 1964, when they followed the Beatles into America, up to 1971, when they recorded the bulk of their masterpiece Exile on Main Street, 7 years. After that, decline. Ditto for the Kinks from You Really Got Me to Lola, and Muswell Hillbillies, often hailed as their last great record in 1971. Want to know something strange? Muswell Hillbillies was recorded inside the Kinks' Imperial Phase, but released just outside it, and it didn't chart in the UK. Beware the power of 7. One band that apparently bucks this 7-year trend is Queen, until you realize they ran more of a marathon than a sprint and were never really imperial. When Freddie Mercury died, Queen had only had 2 UK number ones in their entire 18-year career: Bohemian Rhapsody and Crazy Little Thing Called Love. The Pet Shop Boys had 2 number ones released off just one album, and a couple more strong hits released off the same disc. That is imperious. Radiohead is another band like Queen that appear to defy the 7-year rule until one looks at their trajectory. From OK Computer to In Rainbows, they are putting out number 1 albums, but OK Computer is actually their commercial peak, with Amnesiac and Kid A selling in significantly lower numbers, almost half, before they rise again with Hail to the Thief and In Rainbows, but not quite reaching their former giddy heights. Radiohead simply swapped 7 years of boiling imperiousness for 10 years of simmering dominance. So there it is. Sometimes 7 years is an imperial phase. Sometimes it is the lifespan of an imperial band. Either way, 7 is a pivotal number that looms large in the history of supergroups. I call it the law of imperial phases. When a band crystallizes creatively, the intensity lasts 7 years before decline or transformation, whether through departure or artistic entropy. No one has their finger on the pulse for more than 7 years. This is why Abbey Road, the Beatles' swan song, is not only their best album, but it's as good as the Beatles could have gotten. The Beatles knew instinctively when to call it a day, and they called it a day exactly 7 years to the day without even knowing. What about Oasis? Who cares about Oasis?